The noose scratched against Selina Booker's throat as she stared down at the sea of angry faces. Dust swirled around the makeshift gallows in Rust River's town square. Her hands trembled behind her back. The crowd wanted blood. 3 days earlier, she had stepped off the stagecoach with different dreams. The Arizona Territory stretched endlessly in all directions. Red earth and scrub brush painted the horizon. Selina clutched her worn carpetbag and smoothed her traveling dress. The fabric had seen better days, like everything else she owned. Rust River squatted against the landscape like a collection of weathered bones. False-fronted buildings lined a single dirt road. The saloon, the general store, the church with its crooked steeple, home to maybe 200 souls scratching out existence on the edge of civilization. Selina walked toward the hotel. Her boots kicked up small clouds with each step. The stagecoach driver had already forgotten her. Wheels churned away toward the next stop. Inside the hotel lobby, a thin man with nervous eyes waited behind the desk. His face went pale when he saw her. "You must be Miss Booker," she nodded. "I'm here to meet Mr. Caldwell." The desk clerk's hands fidgeted with a ledger. "Ma'am, I'm afraid there's been some trouble. Mr. Caldwell passed on about 3 weeks back." The words hit like a physical blow. Selina's carefully constructed plans crumbled. She had no money for return passage. No family to wire for help. The forged freedom papers hidden in her bag meant nothing if she starved. How did he die? Took sick real sudden. Strange thing, really. Healthy as a horse one day, dead the next. Selina studied his face. Something flickered behind his eyes. Fear, maybe, or guilt. "I see." She paid for one night's lodging with her remaining coins. The room was small and spare. A narrow bed, a washstand, a window that looked out on the dusty street. Selina sat on the bed's edge and stared at her hands. Running had brought her this far. Now she needed a different kind of courage. The next morning, she found work. Mama Cordelia ran a laundry behind the barber shop. The older woman had kind eyes and strong hands. She looked Selina up and down once, then nodded. "Can you sew?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Folks here need mending more than they need judging." The work was hard but honest. Selina's needle moved steadily through torn shirts and ripped skirts. Her back ached by evening, but she had purpose again. Word spread quickly through town. The children came first. Little Mary Patterson brought a torn apron. Tommy Chen needed his school pants hemmed. They stared at Selina with open curiosity instead of fear. "Can you read?" Mary asked. "I can." "Will you teach me letters?" Selina glanced at Mama Cordelia, who shrugged. Learning never hurt nobody. Soon a small group gathered each afternoon. Selina drew letters in the dirt with a stick. The children traced them with careful fingers. Their eagerness reminded her why knowledge mattered. Not everyone approved. Marcus Thornfield owned the largest ranch in the territory. His house sat on a hill overlooking town like a judgment. He had pale eyes and soft hands that had never known real work. Money gave him influence. Influence gave him power. Thornfield watched from his buggy as Selina taught the children. His expression never changed, but his attention felt heavy as stone. Sheriff Dalton was different, tired eyes in a weathered face. He nodded politely when their paths crossed, but he didn't linger for conversation. Selina sensed he carried troubles of his own. Deputy Fletcher always stood too close when he spoke. His smile never reached his eyes. He asked questions that weren't really questions. Where had she come from? Did she have family? How long did she plan to stay? Selina gave careful answers. The truth would destroy everything she'd built. 3 weeks passed. The children learned quickly. Mary could write her own name now. Tommy read simple words without help. Their parents began bringing more mending work. Some even smiled when they saw her, but Thornfield's attention never wavered. He appeared at Mama Cordelia's shop on a Tuesday morning. His buggy blocked half the street. He climbed down slowly, brushing dust from his coat. "Miss Booker." "Mr. Thornfield. I have a proposition. My niece needs a governess. Someone educated, someone who understands discipline." The offer should have felt like salvation. Steady work, better pay, a chance to use her education properly. Instead, ice formed in her stomach. I'm quite happy with my current situation. Are you, living day to day, dependent on charity? His words cut because they held truth, but something darker lurked beneath his reasonable tone. Think about it, he said. A woman in your position can't afford to refuse good opportunities. He climbed back into his buggy. The wheels creaked as he drove away. Mama Cordelia watched from the doorway. That man's got plans for you. What kind of plans? The kind that don't end well for girls like us. That evening, Selena walked the town's edges. The desert stretched beyond the last building, endless and unforgiving. But it also meant freedom. She could disappear into that vastness, start over somewhere else. Movement caught her eye. A figure on horseback sat motionless on a distant ridge, too far to make out details, but she felt watched, studied. The rider remained perfectly still against the darkening sky. Then he was gone. Selena hurried back to town, but the feeling of being observed lingered. 2 days later, Thornfield returned. This time he didn't ask. My offer stands until tomorrow morning. After that, things might become difficult for you here. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Selena met his pale eyes without flinching. I need time to consider. Of course. A smart woman weighs her options carefully. After he left, the children came for their usual lesson, but several parents arrived early to collect them. Apologetic smiles, urgent errands, sudden concerns about chores. Fear was spreading. Thornfield's influence reached into every corner of Rust River. That night, Selena packed her few belongings. Better to run than submit to whatever Thornfield planned. The desert might kill her, but some fates were worse than death. A knock interrupted her preparations. "Miss Booker," a young voice called through the door. "Mr. Thornfield sent me. Says you're expected at his ranch tomorrow morning. Says it's about the governess position." Selena opened the door. A nervous boy of maybe 12 shifted from foot to foot. "Tell Mr. Thornfield I'll be there." The boy nodded and scurried away. Selena closed the door and leaned against it. She had bought herself one more night, one chance to find another way. Outside her window, the ridge where she'd seen the mysterious rider stood empty against the stars. But somewhere in the darkness, she sensed patient eyes still watching. Tomorrow would bring its own reckoning. Tonight, she could only wait and hope her courage would prove stronger than Thornfield's plans. The desert wind rattled her shutters. It sounded like whispered warnings. Dawn came pale and unforgiving over Rust River. Selena walked the dusty road toward Thornfield's ranch. Her boots found the same rhythm they'd kept for weeks of running, always moving, never safe. The ranch house squatted on its hill like a predator surveying territory. White paint peeled from weathered boards. The porch sagged under the weight of false promises. Selena climbed the steps. Each board groaned beneath her feet. The sound echoed across empty land. Thornfield opened the door before she knocked. His pale eyes moved over her face, cataloging, measuring. "Miss Booker, punctual, I appreciate that in my employees." She hadn't agreed to employment yet, but correcting him felt dangerous. The parlor smelled of stale tobacco and something else, something rotten beneath the surface. Heavy curtains blocked most of the morning light. Shadows gathered in the corners like secrets. "Please sit." Selena remained standing. Distance meant options. Options meant survival. Thornfield poured himself whiskey from a crystal decanter. The liquid caught what little light filtered through the curtains. He didn't offer her any. "You've made quite an impression in town. The children are eager to learn." "Yes, the children." He took a long sip. "Tell me, Miss Booker, what exactly are you teaching them? Letters, numbers, basic reading." "Nothing else. No ideas about their place in the world. No thoughts about equality." The questions hung in the air like smoke. Selena kept her face blank, revealing nothing. "I teach them to read." Thornfield set down his glass. The crystal rang against the wooden table, a small, sharp sound that seemed to slice through the room's stillness. "Some folks think education makes people restless, gives them notions above their station. Knowledge is never dangerous. Isn't it?" He moved closer. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to threaten. His boots scraped against the wooden floor. "Here's what I think happened, Miss Booker. You came here running from something, maybe someone. You had plans that fell through when poor Caldwell died so mysteriously." Selina's hands remained steady at her sides, but her pulse quickened. "Now you're stuck. No money, no family. Dependent on the kindness of people who might change their minds about helping you." The truth of it cut deep, but she'd survived worse than Marcus Thornfield. "I'm offering you a choice. Work for me. Keep your mouth shut about politics and equality and such nonsense, or find yourself with nowhere to go and no one to turn to." "And if I refuse?" Thornfield's smile never reached his eyes. "Why would you refuse a generous offer?" The question wasn't really a question. It was a noose tightening slowly around her throat. "I need time to consider." "Of course, but don't take too long. Opportunities have a way of disappearing." He moved toward her, too close now. His breath smelled of whiskey and decay. "You're a handsome woman, Miss Booker. It would be a shame if circumstances forced you into less respectable work." The threat hit like a physical blow. Selina stepped backward. Her shoulder blades touched the wall. "There are houses in Tombstone, places where a woman with your background might find employment. Of course, that kind of work ages a person quickly." Rage built in her chest like a fire fed by dry wind. But showing anger would only give him more power. "I understand your position, Mr. Thornfield." "Good, I knew you were intelligent." He reached toward her face. Selina moved sideways along the wall, fast, instinctive. Thornfield's hand missed her cheek. His balance shifted. He stumbled forward. "Don't touch me." The words came out harder than she'd intended. Thornfield's expression changed. The false politeness dropped away like a discarded mask. "You forget yourself." "I forget nothing." He lunged toward her. Selina pushed against his chest with both hands, hard, desperate. Thornfield staggered backward. His hip struck the edge of the heavy wooden table. He fell sideways. His head connected with the table's corner. The sound was wet and final. Thornfield lay still on the parlor floor. Blood pooled beneath his head like spilled wine. His pale eyes stared at nothing. Selina pressed her back against the wall. Her breathing came in short, sharp bursts. The room seemed to spin around her. She knelt beside him, felt for a pulse at his wrist. Nothing. His skin was already growing cold. Self-defense. Any reasonable person would see that. But Selina knew better than to expect reason from Rust River's justice. She stood on shaking legs. Her carpetbag sat by the front door where she'd left it. The forged freedom papers lay hidden in its bottom, evidence of one crime. Now there would be two. The front door opened as she reached for her bag. Deputy Fletcher stepped inside. His hand rested on his gun belt. His eyes took in the scene with practiced efficiency. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Selina's throat went dry. "There was an accident." Fletcher knelt beside Thornfield's body. He touched the blood with 2 fingers, brought them to his nose and inhaled. "Accident. That's one word for it." He walked to the sideboard, opened drawers until he found what he was looking for, a small leather pouch, the kind used for herbs and medicines. Selina recognized it immediately, her grandmother's medicine bag, the one she'd carried from Georgia, the one that had gone missing from her room 2 days ago. Fletcher placed the bag beside Thornfield's body. The leather was stained with something dark. "Looks like someone poisoned poor Marcus. Used some kind of root or powder, the kind of thing a person might learn about from their grandmother." "That's not mine." "No, could have sworn I saw you carrying something just like it, teaching those children about healing herbs and such." The trap closed around her like iron jaws. Fletcher had planned this, all of it. "Why?" Fletcher's smile was cold as winter wind. "Marcus had some business dealings that needed to end quietly. You just made things convenient." He pulled rope from his coat pocket. "Turn around." Selina looked toward the door. Fletcher's hand moved to his gun. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." She turned. The rope bit into her wrists, too tight, cutting off circulation. "Help will come looking for me." "Will it? Far as anyone knows, you came here for a job interview. Got angry when Marcus refused to hire you. Decided to solve your problems with poison." Fletcher dragged her toward the door. Her feet scraped against the wooden floor. Mama Cordelia knows where I went. Mama Cordelia's got problems of her own now. Amazing how fast rumors spread about folks who helped the wrong people. The morning sun felt like judgment against Selina's face. Fletcher's horse waited by the porch. He lifted her onto the saddle like a sack of grain. The ride back to town passed in a blur of dust and desperation. Selina's wrists bled where the rope cut into skin. Her mind raced through possibilities. All of them ended the same way. Rust River's main street stretched before them like a pathway to hell. People emerged from buildings, drawn by the spectacle of Deputy Fletcher returning with a prisoner. The jail sat next to the sheriff's office, a small building with barred windows and thick walls. Fletcher dragged Selina inside. The cell smelled of fear and hopelessness. "Sheriff Dalton will want to hear your confession." "I have nothing to confess." Fletcher slammed the cell door. The sound echoed through the small building like a gunshot. "You will." Within an hour, word had spread through every corner of Rust River. Marcus Thornfield was dead, poisoned by the woman who'd been teaching their children, the woman they'd allowed into their homes. Fear turned to anger. Anger turned to fury. By noon, a crowd had gathered outside the jail. Sheriff Dalton arrived looking older than his years. He studied the evidence Fletcher presented: the medicine bag, the poison residue, the witness testimony about Selina's knowledge of herbs. "Looks straightforward enough." Fletcher nodded. "Open and shut case." "What about a trial?" "What's to try? Evidence speaks for itself." The crowd outside grew larger. Voices rose like storm wind. Someone mentioned rope. Someone else mentioned justice. Sheriff Dalton stared through the window at the angry faces. His hands shook slightly as he reached for his keys. "Reckon we'd better get this done before things get out of hand." They built the gallows in the town square. Hammers rang against nails like a funeral bell. The sound carried across the desert. A summons to witness justice, or what passed for justice in a place where fear ruled and truth was buried beneath prejudice and lies. Selina sat in her cell and watched the sun track across the sky. Each shadow that fell across the barred window brought her closer to the noose. But somewhere in the distance, dust rose from the desert floor. Someone was coming. Someone who had been watching, waiting, choosing the right moment to act. The rope would tighten around her throat tomorrow morning. But tonight, patient eyes still watched from the darkness beyond town. Dawn broke like a blade across Rust River. Selina stood on the gallows platform, hands bound behind her back. The noose scratched against her throat. Below, faces twisted with righteous anger stared up at her. Sheriff Dalton's hands trembled as he adjusted the rope. His eyes wouldn't meet hers. Guilt wore him down like water wearing stone. "Any last words?" Selina looked out over the crowd. Children she had taught hid behind their parents' legs. Mama Cordelia stood at the back, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "I am innocent." The words carried across the square like wind through empty buildings. Some faces shifted. Doubt flickered in a few eyes. But fear was stronger than doubt. Deputy Fletcher stood near the gallows lever. His smile was sharp as broken glass. This moment belonged to him. Justice served. Secrets buried. Sheriff Dalton placed his hand on the trapdoor release. The crowd held its breath. Death waited in the space between heartbeats. Hoofbeats thundered into the square. A lone rider burst through the gathered crowd. His horse was lathered with sweat. Dust rose around them like smoke from a signal fire. The man sat straight in his saddle. Dark hair fell to his shoulders. His face was carved from the same red stone that built the desert. He wore buckskin and carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who answered to no earthly power. "Stop!" The single word cut through the morning air. Sheriff Dalton's hand froze on the lever. The rider guided his horse closer to the gallows. His eyes found Selina's face. Something passed between them. Recognition without acquaintance. Understanding without words. "She's my wife." The crowd erupted. Voices rose in confusion and anger. This stranger had no right to interrupt their justice. No authority to make claims about the condemned woman. Sheriff Dalton stepped back from the trapdoor. His face showed relief mixed with uncertainty. Fletcher pushed through the crowd. His hand rested on his gun. "Who are you to make such claims?" The rider dismounted slowly. Every movement was deliberate, controlled. He stood taller than most men in the crowd. His presence filled the square despite the hundreds gathered against him. "Kai Brightwater, this woman is my wife under Apache law. Apache law means nothing here. Territorial law recognizes all legitimate marriages. You know this." Fletcher's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected complications. The hanging was supposed to be simple, clean, final. Sheriff Dalton cleared his throat. "If there's a legal marriage, we need to verify it before proceeding." "There's no marriage," Fletcher said. "This is a lie. A trick to save a murderer." Kai's dark eyes settled on Fletcher's face. "Are you calling me a liar?" The challenge hung in the air like heat lightning. Fletcher's hand moved closer to his gun, but something in Kai's stillness made him reconsider. "I'm saying proof is needed." "Then give us time to provide proof. Territorial law allows 48 hours for verification of marriage claims in capital cases." Sheriff Dalton nodded slowly. "That's correct." The crowd began to grumble. They had come for a hanging. Justice delayed felt like justice denied. Fletcher stepped closer to the sheriff. "This is madness. The woman is guilty. The evidence is clear." "Evidence can wait 2 days." Kai moved to the gallows steps. "I claim the right to speak with my wife privately." Fletcher blocked his path. "No private conversations. If she's really your wife, you can talk to her in public. The law allows spousal consultation." Sheriff Dalton looked between the two men. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the morning chill. 1 hour, in the jail, with supervision. Fletcher's face darkened. But he couldn't argue with territorial law without revealing his true motives. They removed Selena from the gallows. The noose left red marks on her throat. Her legs shook as she walked down the steps. Death had been so close she could taste it. The jail cell was small and dim. Sheriff Dalton positioned himself outside the bars, close enough to hear conversation but far enough to allow some privacy. Kai studied Selena's face through the iron bars. His expression revealed nothing, but his eyes held depths she couldn't fathom. "You don't know me?" "No, but you're willing to die for me." Kai was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old wounds. "I know what it means to be falsely accused." Selena searched his face for deception. "Found only truth. Why should I trust you?" "Because I saw what really happened at Thornfield's ranch." The words hit her like cold water. Selena's breath caught in her throat. "You were there." "I've been watching the town for weeks. Tracking stolen property. Land deeds that belong to my people." He moved closer to the bars. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Fletcher killed Thornfield, not you." Hope bloomed in Selena's chest. Someone knew the truth. Someone had witnessed Fletcher's crime. "Why haven't you told the sheriff?" "My word against a deputy's word. In this town, which carries more weight." The bitter truth of it settled between them. Justice was a luxury neither of them could afford. But together, we might survive long enough to expose the truth. Selena studied this strange man who had ridden into her life at the moment of her death. His face was weathered by sun and wind. Scars marked his hands. He had known hardship. "What do you want in return?" "Help finding the documents Fletcher stole from my people, evidence of his crimes. And if we fail, then we fail together." There was honor in that. More honor than she had found anywhere since leaving Georgia. "How do we convince them we're married?" Kai reached through the bars, took her bound hands in his. His skin was warm and rough from honest work. "Apache marriage requires only mutual consent and public declaration. No ceremony, no papers." "Will they accept that?" "Territorial law recognizes Apache customs. Sheriff Dalton knows this. Fletcher won't give up easily. No, he'll look for ways to discredit our claim, ways to ensure you hang and I disappear." Selena felt the truth of Fletcher's desperation. A living witness threatened everything he had built. "We have 48 hours. Less. Fletcher will find excuses to shorten that time." Kai released her hands. The warmth of his touch lingered on her skin. There's something else. Fletcher has convinced the town that I'm scouting for war parties, that helping me means inviting attack. Fear was Fletcher's greatest weapon. It had nearly cost Selina her life. Now it threatened Kai as well. "What's your real name?" Kai asked. "Selina Booker." "Your real name," she hesitated. Giving him the truth meant trusting him completely. "Selina Washington. I escaped from a plantation in Georgia." Kai nodded. No judgment in his expression, only understanding. "My mother was taken from her people when she was 12, forced to marry a white trader. I understand what it means to live between worlds." The connection between them deepened. Two people shaped by loss, hardened by injustice, now bound together by necessity and something that might grow into more. "Time's up," Sheriff Dalton called. Kai stood. 48 hours. "We'll use every minute." As they led Selina back to her cell, she caught sight of Fletcher through the jail window. He stood in the street talking to a group of angry men, planning, scheming. The 48 hours were already counting down, and Fletcher would use every one of them to ensure that when the time came, both she and Kai would face the noose together. But for the first time since arriving in Rust River, Selina wasn't alone. Someone knew the truth. Someone was willing to fight. The battle for their lives had begun. The second day of their borrowed time dawned gray and unforgiving. Selina sat in her cell while Kai occupied the chair beside Sheriff Dalton's desk. They were allowed to be in the same room now. Husband and wife, according to territorial law. Fletcher paced like a caged animal. His boots wore tracks in the wooden floor. Every few minutes he glanced out the window at the gathering crowd. "People are getting restless," Fletcher said. "Maybe we should move up the execution." Sheriff Dalton didn't look up from his paperwork. 48 hours means 48 hours. What if this Apache brings war parties down on us? What if this is all a trick? Kai remained perfectly still. His hands rested on his knees. But Selina saw the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he breathed. "I've brought no one," Kai said quietly. "That's what you'd say either way." Fletcher's hand drifted toward his gun. The gesture wasn't lost on anyone in the room. "Deputy Fletcher," Sheriff Dalton's voice carried warning. "Why don't you check on the perimeter? Make sure everything's secure." Fletcher's jaw tightened, but he couldn't refuse a direct order. He stomped out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Sheriff Dalton waited until Fletcher's footsteps faded. Then he looked at Kai with tired eyes. "He's not wrong about people being afraid. Half the town thinks you're here to scout for raiders. The other half thinks you're lying about the marriage to save a murderer." Kai studied the sheriff's weathered face. "What do you think?" "I think Marcus Thornfield made a lot of enemies. I think someone wanted him dead, and I think it might not have been your wife." The admission hung in the air between them. Sheriff Dalton had doubts. But doubts weren't enough to stop a hanging. Then why not investigate further? With what time, what resources? Fletcher's got witnesses, evidence, a case that makes sense to folks who want simple answers. Kai leaned forward slightly. "What if I told you Fletcher was selling stolen Apache land deeds?" Sheriff Dalton's pen stopped moving. "I'd say you better have proof. Give me access to Thornfield's ranch. Let me show you what I've seen." "Can't do that. You're technically under guard until this marriage thing gets resolved." Through the bars, Selina watched the exchange. These two men circled each other like wolves testing territory. Each held pieces of truth the other needed. "Sheriff," Selina said quietly, "what happened to my intended husband, the man I was supposed to marry? James Caldwell took sick and died, nothing suspicious about it." "How do you know?" Sheriff Dalton's pen began moving again. But slower now. Fletcher investigated, said it was natural causes. Kai and Selina exchanged glances. Another death. Another convenient explanation. The door opened. Mama Cordelia entered carrying a tray of food. Her face was drawn with worry and exhaustion. "Brought lunch for the prisoners." She set the tray on Sheriff Dalton's desk. Her eyes met Selina's through the bars. "How are you holding up, child?" "I'm managing." Mama Cordelia's gaze shifted to Kai. "This really your husband?" "Yes," Selina said without hesitation. Mama Cordelia studied Kai's face. You got the look of a man who keeps his word. I try. Good. This girl needs someone who keeps promises. She moved closer to the cell bars. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Fletcher's been asking questions about you both. Wants to know if anyone's seen Apache sign near town. Trying to stir up more fear. Kai's hands tightened slightly on his knees. What kind of questions? Whether you've been signaling anyone, whether smoke's been seen on the ridges. Fool questions, but folks are scared enough to listen. Sheriff Dalton cleared his throat. Ma'am, you shouldn't be discussing ongoing investigations. Mama Cordelia straightened. Just bringing food to hungry people. Nothing wrong with that. After she left, the jail fell quiet again. Outside, the sun climbed toward its peak. Time was running out faster than water through cracked earth. Tell me about your grandmother, Kai said suddenly. Selina looked up, surprised. Why? The medicine bag Fletcher planted. He had to know about your background to make it believable. She thought back to her conversations in town. Who had she told about her grandmother's healing knowledge? I mentioned her to some of the children when they asked where I learned about herbs. Who else was listening? Parents sometimes. People bringing mending work. She paused. Fletcher stopped by Mama Cordelia's shop several times. Always when I was teaching. Kai nodded slowly. He's been planning this for weeks, maybe months. But why me? Why not just kill Thornfield and blame someone else? Because you were perfect, an outsider, someone people already viewed with suspicion, and someone who couldn't fight back effectively. The brutal calculation of it settled over Selina like dust from a grave. Fletcher had used her isolation against her. Her vulnerability had made her the ideal scapegoat. There's something else, Kai said. My people have been missing food stores, supplies. Someone's been raiding our winter caches. Sheriff Dalton looked up from his paperwork. You think that's connected? Thornfield and Fletcher controlled the supply routes into town. If they were stealing from the Apache and selling to white settlers, it would explain a lot. Including why they needed the Apache land deeds, Selina added. The pieces were fitting together. A pattern of theft and murder disguised as natural causes and frontier justice. Sheriff Dalton set down his pen. Even if all that's true, I still need proof. Real evidence. Then let us find it. Can't do that. You're both under guard until tomorrow morning. The door burst open again. Fletcher returned with 3 armed men behind him. Their faces were grim with purpose. Sheriff, we've got problems. Smoke signals on the eastern ridge. Looks like Apache war parties moving this way. Kai went very still. There are no war parties. How would you know unless you're part of it? The trap was closing again. Fletcher was manufacturing the crisis he needed to justify immediate action. I want them both moved to the secure cell. Now, Sheriff Dalton stood slowly. That's not necessary. It is if we're about to be under attack. These two are too dangerous to leave unsecured. The armed men spread out behind Fletcher. Their message was clear. The sheriff could comply or be overruled. You're making a mistake, Kai said. The only mistake was letting you live this long. They moved Selina and Kai to the jail's back room, a windowless cell with thicker walls and a heavier door. The sound of their voices would barely carry beyond the bars. As the door clanged shut, Selina realized Fletcher's true plan. There would be no hanging tomorrow morning. Tonight, he would claim they tried to escape, or that Apache raiders attacked the jail to free their scout. Either way, by dawn, both she and Kai would be dead, shot while resisting arrest or killed in a tragic raid that never really happened. The borrowed time was almost gone, and Fletcher held all the cards. But in the darkness of their cell, Kai moved closer to the bars. His hands found the iron and tested its strength. "Can you pick locks?" he whispered. "No, can you?" "No. But I can bend metal when I need to." Outside their cell, voices grew louder. Fletcher was organizing his final move. The endgame was beginning, but some traps could be turned against the trapper. Some hunted animals had teeth of their own. The real fight was about to begin. Midnight came like a judgment over Rust River. Selina pressed her ear to the cell door. Voices carried from the main office. Fletcher's men were drinking, building courage for what came next. Kai worked the cell bars with methodical patience. His hands gripped the iron, muscles strained against metal that had held desperate men for years. "How long?" Selina whispered. "Soon." The bar began to bend, slowly, silently. Kai had been testing it for hours, finding the weak point where rust had eaten through the welding. In the front office, someone laughed too loudly. Glass clinked against glass. Fletcher was keeping his men drunk enough to follow orders without asking questions. The bar gave way with a soft grinding sound. Kai eased it aside. The gap was narrow but sufficient. Selina squeezed through first. Her dress caught on the rough metal. Kai followed, his broad shoulders barely fitting the opening. They stood in the back room of the jail, a storage area filled with forgotten evidence and broken furniture. Dust motes danced in the moonlight that filtered through a small window. Kai tested the window latch. It moved without sound. He had oiled it earlier with grease from the food tray. "Where do we go?" "Thornfield's ranch. The evidence we need is there." They slipped through the window into the alley behind the jail. The night air was cold against Selina's skin. Stars wheeled overhead in patterns that seemed to map their uncertain future. Kai led her through back streets and empty lots. He moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent years avoiding detection. Selina followed, her heart hammering against her ribs. They reached the livery stable without encountering Fletcher's patrols. The horses stirred restlessly as they entered. Kai selected 2 mounts. Not the fastest animals, but the most reliable. "Can you ride?" "Well enough." They led the horses out through the stable's back door. The animals' hooves made soft sounds in the dirt. Every noise seemed magnified in the desert silence. Once clear of town, they mounted and rode hard toward Thornfield's ranch. The landscape rushed past them in shades of silver and black. Wind carried the scent of sage and distant rain. Behind them, a lantern appeared in the jail window. Shouts erupted from the building. Fletcher had discovered their escape. "They'll follow," Selina called over the wind. "Let them come." The ranch house sat dark and empty on its hill. Thornfield's death had left the place abandoned. Even the hired hands had drifted away to find work elsewhere. Kai dismounted and helped Selina down. His hands lingered on her waist for a moment longer than necessary. Something passed between them in the darkness. An acknowledgement of trust earned and given. They broke into the house through a back window. The parlor still smelled of death despite the days that had passed. Bloodstains marked the wooden floor where Thornfield had fallen. Kai went straight to the desk. His hands moved through drawers with practiced efficiency. Papers rustled in the darkness. "What exactly are we looking for?" "Bills of sale, land deeds. Anything that shows where Thornfield got his inventory." Selina searched the bedroom while Kai worked through the office. She found a strongbox hidden behind loose floorboards. The lock was substantial, but the hinges were weak. Kai pried it open with a kitchen knife. Inside lay a collection of documents that told a story of systematic theft. Apache winter supplies, stolen horses, land grabbed through forged transfers. "Your mail-order groom's name was James Caldwell." "Yes." Kai held up a letter. "He wrote to the territorial governor, said he had evidence of illegal land seizures, wanted to report corruption in the local government." The final piece fell into place. Caldwell hadn't died of natural causes. He had been murdered for threatening Fletcher's operation. "There's more." A ledger showed payments made to Fletcher over months, large sums that far exceeded a deputy's salary. Money earned by selling stolen Apache property to white settlers hungry for cheap land. Hoofbeats thundered in the distance. Fletcher's posse was closing in. Kai stuffed the documents into a leather satchel. "We need to go." They slipped out the back as Fletcher's men surrounded the front of the house. Lantern light bounced crazily as the searchers dismounted and kicked in the door. Selina and Kai reached their horses just as angry voices erupted from inside the house. The sound of furniture being overturned echoed across the empty land. They rode hard into the desert, no destination in mind except away. The documents in Kai's satchel bounced against his back with each stride. "Where can we go?" Selina called. "My people have a camp in the hills, Hidden Canyon, Fletcher will never find it. They rode through the remainder of the night. The landscape grew rougher as they climbed into the foothills. Rocky terrain that would slow pursuit and hide their tracks. Dawn found them at the mouth of a narrow canyon. Red stone walls rose on both sides, a hidden passage that seemed to lead nowhere. Kai guided his horse into the canyon. The passage twisted and turned between towering walls. After a quarter-mile, it opened into a sheltered valley. Apache lodges dotted the valley floor. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Children played in the morning light while their mothers prepared food and mended gear. The arrival of strangers caused immediate alert. Warriors appeared with weapons ready. But when they recognized Kai, tension eased. An elderly woman approached them. Her face was weathered by years of wisdom and sorrow. She spoke to Kai in rapid Apache. He answered in the same language. "My grandmother wants to know if you are truly my wife." Selina looked into the old woman's dark eyes, saw acceptance there and something else, understanding born of shared struggle. "Tell her yes," Kai translated. His grandmother nodded slowly. She reached out and touched Selina's hand. The gesture carried weight beyond words. They were given food and shelter, a place to rest and plan their next move. But safety was temporary. Fletcher would keep searching, keep spreading lies about Apache war parties and dangerous fugitives. While Selina slept, exhausted by their flight, Kai spread the stolen documents before the tribal elders. Faces darkened as they read the evidence of systematic theft. "This proves everything," the war chief said in English. "But will white courts believe Apache testimony?" "Not Apache testimony alone, but we have documentation now, proof in Fletcher's own handwriting." "What do you propose?" Kai looked toward the lodge where Selina rested. "We return to town, make the evidence public, force them to confront the truth." "That's suicide. Fletcher will kill you both before you reach the courthouse." "Maybe, but running solves nothing. More of our people will suffer. More innocent people will die." The war chief studied Kai's face. "The woman agrees with this plan. We haven't discussed it yet. She should have a voice in her own death." When Selina woke, Kai presented the choice. Stay hidden in the canyon or return to face Fletcher with the truth. She thought of the children she had taught, of Mama Cordelia's kindness, of all the people who would suffer if Fletcher's corruption continued unchecked. "When do we leave?" Kai smiled for the first time since she had known him. It transformed his entire face. "Tomorrow. The circuit judge will be in town for the regular court session. If we can present evidence publicly, Fletcher won't be able to silence us. And if we can't, then we'll die knowing we tried." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was better than living as fugitives while innocent people suffered. The desert wind carried the scent of distant storms. Change was coming to Rust River whether Fletcher wanted it or not. Truth had a way of surfacing no matter how deep it was buried. Sunday morning came with church bells ringing across Rust River. The sound carried over empty streets and shuttered windows. Most of the town would be gathered in one place, perfect for what Selina and Kai had planned. They rode into town from the east. The sun at their backs cast long shadows ahead of them. Kai carried the leather satchel with Thornfield's documents, evidence that would either save them or seal their fate. The church sat at the end of Main Street, white clapboard walls and a bell tower that reached toward heaven. People streamed through the doors in their Sunday finest. Families, children, the same people who had gathered to watch Selina hang. Kai dismounted first. He helped Selina down from her horse. His hands were steady, but she felt the tension in his grip. "Ready?" "No, but that doesn't matter." They walked toward the church entrance. A few early arrivals noticed them. Whispers spread like wildfire through the crowd. The escaped murderer and her Apache accomplice had returned. Deputy Fletcher stood near the church steps. He wore his Sunday clothes, but his gun belt remained strapped around his waist. His eyes widened when he saw them approaching. "Stop right there." His voice carried across the churchyard. Conversations died. All attention focused on the confrontation unfolding in the morning light. Sheriff Dalton emerged from the crowd. His face showed relief mixed with resignation. "Selina, Kai, I was hoping you'd come back. We have evidence, Kai said, proof of Fletcher's crimes. Fletcher's hand moved toward his gun. These are dangerous fugitives. They need to be arrested immediately. Let them speak first. The new voice belonged to Judge Morrison, a thin man with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much injustice to ignore more. He had arrived on the morning stage for the monthly court session. Fletcher's jaw tightened. A circuit judge changed everything. This wasn't his jurisdiction anymore. Your Honor, these individuals escaped from custody. They're wanted for murder. I'm aware of the charges, but territorial law allows defendants to present evidence in their defense. Selena stepped forward. The crowd parted around her. Some faces showed curiosity. Others displayed the same hatred that had put her on the gallows. People of Rust River, you were ready to hang me for Marcus Thornfield's murder, but I didn't kill him. Liar, someone called from the crowd. Deputy Fletcher killed Thornfield, and he killed James Caldwell before that. Fletcher pushed through the gathered people. This is ridiculous. I have witnesses, evidence. Kai opened the leather satchel. We have evidence too. He pulled out the first document, Caldwell's letter to the territorial governor. Kai read it aloud. Each word fell on the crowd like stones into still water. James Caldwell discovered that someone was stealing Apache winter supplies, selling them to white settlers at huge profits. He wrote to the governor asking for an investigation. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some people remembered Caldwell, a quiet man who had kept to himself. 3 days after he mailed this letter, he was dead. Fletcher stepped closer to Judge Morrison. Your Honor, this is all fabrication. Lies designed to save a guilty woman. Kai produced the next document, Thornfield's ledger showing payments to Fletcher, large sums that couldn't be explained by a deputy's salary. Fletcher was being paid for information. When Apache hunting parties left their camps, where winter food stores were hidden, when raids would go undetected. The crowd's mood was shifting. Doubt crept into faces that had been certain of Selena's guilt. Mama Cordelia pushed forward from the back of the crowd. I saw Fletcher planting that medicine bag, thought he was just cleaning up evidence, but he was placing it there. Fletcher's face went pale. That's a lie. Is it? Then explain this. Kai held up the final document, a bill of sale in Fletcher's handwriting. Apache horses sold to a buyer in Tucson, dated 2 days before Thornfield's death. You were stealing from the Apache. Thornfield wanted a bigger cut of the profits. You killed him during the argument. Fletcher's composure cracked. His hand dropped to his gun. Even if that were true, you can't prove I killed anyone. I can. Judge Morrison stepped between Fletcher and his weapon. Deputy Fletcher, I'm ordering you to surrender your firearm pending investigation of these charges. I don't take orders from you. The words hung in the air like smoke from a signal fire. Fletcher had revealed his true nature. The crowd stepped back, suddenly understanding the danger they faced. Sheriff Dalton moved closer to Fletcher. Give me the gun, Wade. Fletcher spun toward him. You're part of this conspiracy, all of you. His desperation was complete now. Cornered and exposed, he had nothing left to lose. I built something here, brought prosperity to this town, and you want to destroy it for them. He gestured at Selena and Kai with undisguised hatred. Fletcher, Judge Morrison said quietly, it's over. Surrender peacefully and you'll get a fair trial. Fair trial from you people. Fletcher drew his gun, but Sheriff Dalton was ready. He tackled Fletcher around the waist. They fell to the ground in a tangle of limbs and Sunday clothes. The gun went off. The shot echoed across the churchyard. Women screamed. Children cried. But when the dust settled, Fletcher lay unconscious beneath Sheriff Dalton's weight. Judge Morrison picked up the fallen weapon. Sheriff, place Deputy Fletcher under arrest for the murders of Marcus Thornfield and James Caldwell. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Fletcher was dragged away. Everything they had believed about justice and guilt had been turned upside down in the space of a few minutes. Judge Morrison addressed the gathering. These proceedings will continue in formal court tomorrow morning, but based on the evidence presented, all charges against Selena Booker are dismissed. People began to disperse. Some avoided looking at Selena and Kai. Others approached with awkward apologies. The children she had taught ran to her with expressions of joy and relief. Mama Cordelia wrapped Selena in a fierce hug. "Knew you were innocent, child. Knew it in my bones." As the crowd thinned, Selena and Kai found themselves alone in the churchyard. The morning sun had climbed higher. The shadows that had seemed so long and threatening were growing shorter. "What happens now?" Selena asked. "Fletcher will stand trial. The stolen Apache lands will be returned. Justice will be served. I meant with us." Kai was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of possibility. "We could make the marriage real if you wanted." Selena studied his face. This man who had risked everything to save her, who had stood with her against an entire town's hatred. "I'd like that." 6 months later, they stood together in the same churchyard, this time wearing wedding clothes, surrounded by friends instead of enemies. Apache tribal members sat beside white townspeople. Children played between the pews without regard for the color of their skin or their parents' heritage. Selena had established her school in a building donated by grateful parents. Apache children learned alongside white children, two communities slowly building bridges across old wounds. Kai worked with the territorial government to prevent future land thefts. His quiet authority had earned respect from officials who had once dismissed Apache concerns. Sheriff Dalton had been elected mayor after Fletcher's conviction. He ruled with fairness that gradually healed the town's divisions. As the ceremony ended and people celebrated around them, Selena reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the shadow of the gallows to this moment of joy and hope. Sometimes salvation came from the most unexpected places. Sometimes justice arrived on horseback with dark eyes and a quiet voice. The desert wind carried the scent of rain. New growth was coming to this harsh but beautiful land. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.